The shimmer of Texas heat danced above the cracked asphalt at Miller's fuel stop, blurring the lines between land and sky. 7-year-old Rachel Connor stood quietly beside a battered pickup, one hand resting on the strong shoulder of the German Shepherd by her side. His fur was thick and sable, sunlit edges catching fire as he sat alert, ears pricked forward. To most, he looked calm, but Rachel felt the tension coil through him like a wire pulled taut. The distant growl of motorcycles ruptured the quiet, growing louder as chrome beasts tore into the station like predators drawn to scent. Rachel didn't flinch, though the shepherd stepped forward, muscles tensing, placing himself protectively between her and the rising roar. Inside the station, Frank Miller paused mid-step, rag in hand, his face hardening with recognition. The leather-clad riders formed a slow-moving circle around the gas pumps, patches emblazoned with a crimson-eyed serpent. Their leader, a mountain of a man with a thick beard and tattooed arms, dismounted first. Jackson Chains Blackwood. He spotted Rachel instantly. "Well, what do we have here?" he drawled, his boots scraping the pavement like a slow threat. He moved closer, towering over the girl, eyes flicking between her and the dog. "Cute kid," he said. "Cuter dog." His hand reached out toward her head. He never made contact. The German Shepherd shifted with chilling precision, sliding between Rachel and the biker's outstretched fingers. His lips peeled back in silence, exposing perfect, gleaming teeth. A low growl rumbled from his chest, not loud, but enough to freeze the man's hand midair. Chain's eyes narrowed. "Your mutt's got an attitude problem." The shepherd didn't move. Rachel didn't blink. The air thickened, charged with something primal. Chain's hand dropped to the knife on his belt. But something in the dog's unflinching stance, something in Rachel's steady gaze, made him pause. What he didn't know, couldn't know, was that this shepherd had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, that he had tackled armed insurgents, that he had lost his handler to an IED and had carried that wound every day since. Now, that same instinct to protect burned in his eyes, fixed entirely on the girl who hadn't spoken a word. Cinematic lighting, 16.9. Realistic 3D. Frank Miller stepped outside, shotgun resting in the crook of his arm. Not raised, but visible. The bikers circled restlessly, revving their engines like wolves testing the edge of a campfire. The German Shepherd never broke his stance. He didn't lunge, he didn't bark, but his posture radiated a message no man there could misread. "You touch her, and I will end you." Then the gravel crunched under tires. Thomas Connor's pickup pulled into the lot, and the atmosphere changed. In one fluid movement, Thomas exited the truck, calm on the outside, storm-eyed beneath. Rachel remained where she was. So did the dog. "Rachel!" Thomas called, his voice even but steel-lined. "Max, hold!" Rachel's hand stayed on the shepherd's shoulder. He didn't budge. Thomas approached slowly, placing himself at his daughter's side, close enough for her to lean on if she needed. "Everything okay here, Frank?" Frank gave a nod, gripped tight on his shotgun. "Just explaining we're closing for the night." Chains chuckled darkly. "Sun's still up, old man?" His eyes locked onto Thomas, recognition flickering. "Security consultant, Marine. Thought you looked familiar." "We're just getting gas," Thomas said, calm as cooled ash. "Same as anyone." The bikers tested boundaries. One knocked over a rack of windshield fluid. Bottles clattered. Blue liquid ran like blood across the concrete. Max's ears twitched, but he held the line. Chains stepped closer. "See, there's a way things work around here. Folks pay for protection. Because, accidents." His gesture toward the spill was lazy, but calculated. Thomas didn't bite. Neither did the dog. Rachel's eyes never left the biker's face. For all their talk and swagger, something in her silence seemed to unsettle Chains. Maybe it was the way her hand remained calm on the shepherd's fur. Maybe it was the way the dog watched his every breath. They left minutes later, but not before a final, lingering stare passed between Chains and Thomas, one that said this wasn't over. By sundown, the town was already whispering. About the girl who hadn't blinked. About the shepherd who didn't bark, but promised death. Cinematic lighting. 16.9. Realistic 3D. The gas station encounter didn't fade. It ignited something. By morning, the story had taken on a life of its own. In Mabel's diner, they said little Rachel Connor stared down Chain's Blackwood without flinching. At the hardware store, Pete Wilson claimed the German shepherd nearly tore a biker's throat out. In town, whispers spread like wildfire. The girl, the dog, the Marine. A defiant trinity. Thomas didn't welcome the attention. He watched it grow warily, like smoke on the horizon. He knew what was coming. By the second day, the iron serpents were circling Riverside Junction with intention. Not subtle, not random. This was surveillance, intimidation, an insurgent's playbook recycled in small-town Texas. Thomas kept Rachel home from school, set her up with books and crayons in view of his workbench. Max stayed nearby, training gear laid out in silent ritual. Around 4 p.m., the sirens broke the uneasy calm. 2 bikers had stormed the hardware store. Pete tried to intervene. They shattered his register, then his arm. A message, Frank reported on the phone. For anyone thinking of playing hero. That night, Thomas cleaned his sidearm on the porch. Rachel slept curled into Max, her breath slow and even against his thick coat. Thomas's thoughts raced. He replayed the moment at the station, over and over. It wasn't just Chain's aggression. It was the flicker in his eyes when he saw Rachel. Recognition, maybe. Or something older, buried, miles away, in an abandoned warehouse turned biker den. Chains stared at a worn photograph. A boy and a girl, younger versions of himself and someone with Rachel's eyes. His sister, lost to foster care when their mother went to prison. He'd looked for her, failed. Now, Rachel haunted him, not just as a child to manipulate, but as someone eerily familiar. Still, the serpents kept pressing the town. Windows smashed, deliveries disrupted, the pharmacy vandalized, and all around them, fear spread like mold. In the grocery store, Martha Simmons spoke loud enough for all to hear. That little girl and her dog brought this trouble here. Rachel stood silent, still. But Max shifted, vest snug around his chest, moving closer to her. Thomas clenched an apple, said nothing, but he felt it. The town was cracking. Cinematic lighting, 16:9. Realistic 3D. At the town's elementary school, Principal Davis approached Thomas with forced calm. Given the tensions, maybe Rachel should stay home, just for a few days, for her safety. Her eyes flicked toward Max. Some parents are concerned. A military dog at school? With all this biker trouble? Rachel stood beside her father, her hand slipping into his. Small, firm, silent. She needs him, Thomas replied, especially now. Later that night, there was a knock on the door. Frank Miller, hat in hand, looked worn down by more than years. Heard what happened at Jenkins' store, he said. Martha's always had a mouth, but this isn't right. He handed Thomas a flyer. Town meeting, tomorrow night. I was in Korea, Frank added, eyes flicking toward Rachel on the living room floor, drawing with Max beside her. This is the same playbook. Divide the strong, make neighbors turn. Folks don't see it yet, but you and I, we know what comes next. The following evening, the community center overflowed. Tension hummed in every whispered argument. When Thomas walked in with Rachel and Max, conversation dipped, then resumed in louder, sharper tones. They're escalating, Mayor Harrison said. Windows are broken. People are scared. We need to decide how to respond. Maybe we just pay them, someone muttered. It's cheaper than repairs every week. Frank stood, voice tight. That's not how extortion works. They'll keep coming. Easy for you to say, Martha Simmons snapped. Your station's untouched. The argument rose until it was a wall of noise. That's when Thomas stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. In Afghanistan, I watched insurgents destroy villages without firing a shot, he began. They used fear, division. They made neighbors blame each other. It starts like this. The only way to beat them is together. Mutual support, protection networks, communication. As murmurs stirred, Rachel suddenly stiffened. Thomas noticed instantly, shallow breath, tight fingers. Max responded before he could move. Quietly, the shepherd pressed against Rachel, laid his head in her lap. The change was almost imperceptible, but it calmed her, and others saw. Deputy Wilson, Frank, Dr. Chin. They saw how this dog, a soldier, understood what to do when words failed. Cinematic lighting, 16.9, realistic 3D. After the meeting, Pete Wilson approached Thomas, his arm in a sling. Rachel, silent by her father's side, handed Pete a folded drawing, her quiet voice absent, but her meaning clear. In the picture, Pete stood healed, flanked by townspeople in a protective circle. Max stood watch in the foreground, drawn with striking detail. "Thank you," Pete said, his voice cracking. "I needed this today." That image, a town united, spoke more than speeches ever could. It stirred something in Deputy Wilson. "We've got more strength here than we realize," she murmured. The next 3 days were a whirlwind. Thomas transformed his living room into a command center. Maps, radios, shift logs. Max, despite his age and injury, became the center of a crash course in canine behavior. Residents learned to read his posture, his cues. Others started training their own dogs. It wasn't military grade, but it was something. The school board reversed course. Not only was Rachel welcomed back, but Max was too, an honorary presence in the second-grade classroom. Rachel, speaking more each day, found her voice in explaining Max's training. Kids gravitated toward him. He made the scared feel brave. One afternoon, Rachel sat drawing at the gas station while Thomas upgraded security. Frank watched her from behind the counter, weighed down by guilt. The burner phone in his pocket vibrated like a viper. When he answered, the voice on the other end was cold. "They're setting up a camera covering the school route. Volunteers on Main Street." "Good," Chain said. "Keep feeding me updates." Frank hung up. Rachel looked at him. She turned her drawing. It showed a man like Frank talking to a shadowy figure with a serpent tattoo. A prison loomed in the background. "My boy's in trouble," Frank whispered, as much to himself as to her. "They'll hurt him if I don't help them." "You understand protecting family, don't you?" Rachel didn't reply. She simply handed him another drawing. Frank standing with Thomas, Wilson, and others, shielding a boy. There was another way, but before Frank could act on it, the motorcycles came. Cinematic lighting, 16:9, realistic 3D. The sound reached Rachel before the adults did. A low rumble that sent her eyes toward the horizon. Max, miles away at the clinic with Thomas, snapped upright. Ears forward, body coiled. He knew. Thomas's phone rang before he could move. "Multiple bikes," Deputy Wilson said. "At least 8, headed for the center of town." "Rachel's at the gas station," Thomas replied, already moving. Max fell into stride beside him. Frank, inside the store, saw the riders too late. Chain's voice crackled through the burner phone. "Time's up. Leave the door open or your boy suffers." "There's a child here," Frank whispered. "Thomas's daughter." "Not my problem." Frank looked out through the crack in the door. Rachel was watching, drawing again. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. He reached for the store phone to call Thomas, but the roar of engines drowned everything. As Thomas and Max sprinted toward the station, Chains and 5 others arrived. Frank stepped outside, voice trembling but firm. "There's a child here, Chains. Don't do this." 2 bikers pushed past him. Rachel's cry pierced the air. Max bolted forward, a blur of fury. He hit the screen door like a missile, launching himself at the first man inside. The second biker reached for something. Max clamped down on his wrist, stopping the motion cold. Chains turned in surprise. Then fury. He hurled a heavy chain, It hit Max square across the muzzle. The shepherd staggered, blood dripping from a gash, but didn't fall. Butcher, a massive biker, emerged from the store, Rachel in his arms. "Get the kid!" Chains barked. Max turned, ready to intercept, but he was bleeding. Slowed, Chains swung again. Rachel bit down hard on Butcher's hand. He cursed, didn't let go. He threw her onto his bike and roared off, 2 others following. Chains locked eyes with Thomas across the lot. It wasn't triumph Thomas saw. It was something older. Regret? Conflict? Then they were gone. Deputy Wilson's sirens approached. Frank lay unconscious. Max limped to his side, checked him, then returned to Thomas. Bleeding, but alert. In his eyes was only one question. Where is she? Cinematic lighting, 16:9, realistic 3D. Thomas had known fear before. IEDs in Helmand, sniper fire in the Korengal. But nothing matched the hollow terror of seeing his daughter vanish on the back of a motorcycle. Deputy Wilson kept him grounded, her voice sharp with urgency, calling in the abduction, alerting every nearby unit. "What do you know about their hideouts?" she demanded. "The old Riverside Mill," Thomas replied, breath ragged. 5 miles north. We've been tracking them. Frank, regaining consciousness, stumbled toward them, guilt etched into every wrinkle. "It's my fault," he confessed. "They had my son. I gave them updates, but I tried to stop them. I swear it." Thomas should have exploded. But war had taught him something. Fear makes people do desperate things. He nodded once. Acceptance, not absolution. "She left something," Frank said suddenly, before they grabbed her. Under the counter, Thomas found it. A hand-drawn map of the area, crude but clear. An X marked a spot near the old water tower, beyond where they'd thought the serpents were based. Beside it, Rachel had left her bracelet, the one with her mother's charm. Max sniffed it, memorizing her scent with military focus. By noon, the town had mobilized. Rachel's face was now everyone's mission. The bakery became a supply depot. The hardware store fortified roadblocks. Even Martha Simmons opened her home for coordination. "They'll expect us to come straight at them," Thomas said, outlining his plan. "So we won't." As the town prepared a distraction at the mill, Thomas gathered a small team: Deputy Wilson, Dr. Chin, and, unexpectedly, Frank Miller. "I know those woods," Frank said, voice hard. "I won't let another child suffer for my mistakes." Max stood beside them, wound bandaged, posture alert. Despite the pain, he radiated one singular focus: bring her home. Before leaving, Thomas ran through his gear with the practiced calm of a soldier. But this wasn't duty. This wasn't country. This was his daughter. The rusting silhouette of the old water tower loomed above the treetops, casting a long skeletal shadow over the clearing. From the brush, Thomas saw 3 bikes and faint movement near the maintenance shed. Max, beside him, was motionless, a statue of tension and precision. "The shed," Frank whispered. "Used to be a water district office. If they've got her, she's in there." Thomas nodded. Through a cracked window, he saw Butcher's bulk moving inside. Another guard at the door. No sign of Chains. Thomas unhooked Max's leash and gave the signal: search and protect. The German shepherd melted into the undergrowth, circling wide. Then, a voice behind them. "Looking for something, Marine?" Chains stepped from the trees, pistol at his side, not raised. Thomas turned slowly, hands visible. "You know why I'm here." Chains nodded. "Figured you'd find us. Your kid's smart, left clues." His voice carried something strange. Not threat, not smugness. Remorse. "She's fine, scared, not hurt. Butcher wanted leverage. I said no. Kids are off limits." "Then why take her?" Dr. Chin demanded. "Because the town got organized. We had to break them," Chains said flatly. He pulled something from his vest. A photograph, creased, old. 2 children, a teen boy and a little girl with Rachel's eyes. "My sister," he said. "Got split up in foster care. Searched for her for years. Then I saw your girl at the gas station. Her eyes. Then I heard her name. Rachel Connor. My sister married a Connor. Thomas stared at the photo. Elizabeth, he breathed. Chains nodded. You were good to her? He asked, voice rough. I loved her, Thomas replied. Still do. Max reappeared then, stepping from the trees. He looked at Thomas, then back toward the shed. Found her. Safe. I need to get my daughter, Thomas said, pocketing the photo. Chains didn't stop him. Instead, he drew his weapon, not to threaten, but to offer. Butcher won't back down, he warned. You may need this. Thomas shook his head. We've got this. He gave Max the signal. The dog darted ahead, silent, sure. Thomas followed, Frank and Dr. Chin behind. This time, they weren't defending. They were reclaiming what mattered most. The shed erupted in motion. Max crashed through a rear window in a controlled blur of muscle and rage, drawing the guards' attention. At the front, Thomas surged forward, disarming the distracted sentry with soldier's precision. Inside, Butcher turned just in time to see Max bearing down. He barely had time to react before the dog slammed into him, pinning him to the floor. Rachel was tied to a chair in the corner, wide-eyed, but unbroken. She cried out the moment she saw Max, and then her father. Thomas rushed to her, blade slicing the bindings. As he pulled her into his arms, Butcher managed to shove Max off and reach for a hidden blade, but he didn't strike. Chains stepped into the doorway, voice low but clear. It's over, Butcher sneered. You've gone soft. He lunged, not at Thomas or Rachel, but at Chains himself. The next moments blurred into chaos. Some say Max intervened, shielding Chains from the blade. Others claim Chains knocked it aside himself. Either way, both were wounded. Chains stabbed. Max slashed across the shoulder. When Deputy Wilson burst through the door with her officers, they found a frozen tableau. Rachel in her father's arms, Dr. Chin tending wounds, Butcher restrained under Frank Miller's surprisingly strong grip, and Max, bleeding, upright, unwavering, guarded them all. Uncle Jack, Rachel whispered, eyes locked on Chains. Her first word since being taken. It shattered something in the biker's face. At the clinic, Dr. Chin worked frantically. The knife wound across Max's shoulder had cut deep. Muscle, blood vessels, dangerously close to vital structures. The table beneath him was soaked, but he didn't move, didn't cry out. He had done his job. Thomas sat with Rachel in the waiting room, her small body pressed to his side, both of them coated in the day's fear and blood and hope. Deputy Wilson arrived, dusty and grim. Jackson Blackwood wants to see Rachel, she said. His wound wasn't as deep, but he's under observation. Thomas tensed. No, he said. She's been through enough. Rachel stirred. Max? She asked. He's strong, Thomas answered, brushing her hair back. Just like you. Rachel sat vigil at Max's side, small fingers stroking his unbandaged ear. His breath was shallow, every rise of his chest a fragile triumph. Dr. Chin moved like a ghost through the clinic, whispering orders, adjusting IVs, checking vitals. Outside, the town pulsed with anxious energy. Then the second attack came. Butcher, freshly bailed, led the remaining Iron Serpents in a midnight assault. This time, their target wasn't a business. It was the clinic. A siren screamed, 3 short bursts from the fire station bell. A signal, a call to arms. Riverside Junction answered. Barricades sprang up. Spotlights ignited. Volunteers took their places. It wasn't firepower that met the bikers, but resolve. And cameras, documentation, visibility. The town stood as one. Deputy Wilson burst into the clinic. They're splitting their forces, she said, targeting the school and community center too. They want to divide us, Thomas muttered. Standard insurgency tactic. Inside, Max's vitals wavered. Dr. Chin's jaw tightened. We can't move him. It could kill him. Her assistant nodded. We stay. Thomas faced the hardest choice of his life. Rachel sat curled beside Max, exhausted. If he left, he helped defend the town. If he stayed, he left others vulnerable. Rachel solved it for him. Max would help them if he could. she said. That's what he's trained for. I'll stay with Dr. Chin. You go. Thomas knelt beside her. You're so brave, he whispered. I learned from Max. Outside, the assault began. Bikers hit from the front and rear. Smoke and screams filled the air. But the town was ready. Fire extinguishers doused flames. Radios kept everyone in sync. When Butcher forced his way into the clinic, Thomas was waiting. Inside, Max's breathing faltered. Rachel sang, softly, shakily, a lullaby her mother used to hum. Max stirred, a twitch of an ear. Then Butcher crashed through the surgical suite door, crowbar raised. Rachel froze. Thomas lunged, but wouldn't reach her in time. And Max rose, bleeding, trembling, but defiant. The German Shepherd stood tall on the metal table, between Rachel and the threat, unmoving, unbreakable. In that moment, everything changed. When morning broke over Riverside Junction, it revealed a town changed, not just by violence, but by what had endured it. 3 citizens were hospitalized. The clinic was scorched and battered, but Max had survived. Barely. In the recovery room, machines whispered steady rhythms. Dr. Chin stood vigil with a veterinary trauma specialist flown in by helicopter, paid for by Jackson Chains Blackwood himself. Thomas watched Max sleep, bandaged from shoulder to hip, his breath shallow but fighting. Rachel never left his side. In a quiet moment, she turned to her father. Uncle Jack wouldn't hurt me, she said. That's why Max only bit Butcher. It was true. Even wounded, Max had shown restraint, discerning threat from kin. Deputy Wilson arrived with unexpected news. Jackson had offered a full confession to federal agents. Names, locations, operations. A full takedown of the Iron Serpent's network across 3 states. In exchange, she added, he asked for protection, for Rachel and for you. Thomas didn't trust it. Not yet. But when he met Jackson outside the clinic, bandaged and surrounded by officers, he saw something real, something broken trying to be whole. When she called me Uncle Jack, Jackson said, I heard Lizzie's voice for the first time in years. He pulled a drawing from his coat. Rachel's crayon family portrait. Thomas, Rachel, Elizabeth. And at the edge, a man labeled Uncle Jack looking in. She made this while they had her, Jackson said, voice cracking. Told me about her mom, my Lizzie. Said she used to tell her stories about a lost uncle. Thomas looked at the drawing, then at the man who had once been his enemy. Elizabeth always believed people could change, he said quietly. I wish I'd found her sooner, Jackson replied. Later that week, the town met at the community center. Frank Miller stood at the podium, owning his betrayal. They had my son, he said simply, and I was afraid. But I see now. Courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about standing firm anyway. When the debate grew heated, Rachel walked to Frank. She didn't speak. She took his hand. Forgiveness, small, solemn, and powerful, rippled through the room. 6 months later, the water tower that once housed shadows now overlooked something new, a community center built from reclaimed ruins and filled with light. Max stood beside Thomas as volunteers installed the final window panes, his proud frame slightly favoring his left side, a quiet testament to all he'd endured. Frank Miller approached, 2 coffees in hand. My boy's out, he said. Working here with me. This place, it's our start over. Inside, the center held more than offices. It housed Thomas's new veterans support group, PTSD therapy built around animal companions. Max, once trained for combat, now healed others with silence and presence. Veterans came from counties away just to sit with him. Rachel had become the heart of it all. Her voice, once lost, had returned. She read to younger children, drew murals for therapy rooms, helped shape what the space would become. Even Jackson found his place, serving a reduced sentence. He spent his days teaching bike repair to local teens under a county rehab program overseen by now Sheriff Wilson. His path was far from finished, but every day was one step closer to redemption. On the anniversary of Water Tower Day, The entire town gathered under a cloudless sky. Rachel, in a blue sundress, stood at the podium beside Max. She placed a hand on his head before speaking. "Max is brave even when he's scared," she said. "He's strong even when he's hurt. He protects people even when they don't know they need protecting." Then, looking out at the gathered crowd, she added, "Our town is like Max now. We look out for each other. We're stronger than we look, and we're not afraid anymore." Later, the family, Thomas, Rachel, Max, and Jackson, walked together to Elizabeth's grave. Rachel placed wildflowers at its base. "She'd be happy we're all here," she said simply. Thomas and Jackson said nothing, but neither disagreed. That evening, as twilight washed Riverside Junction in amber light, Rachel read aloud from the porch swing. Thomas and Jackson listened. Max, graying now, lay at their feet, still alert, still watchful, still guarding everything he loved. Because some missions don't end with war.